Chapter 22. A Savant at Home. "Why should I not ask your cousin?" I inquired earnestly. "I see by your manner that you are in sore need of a friend, and yet you will not allow me to act as such." "Not allow you?" she echoed. "You are my friend. Were it not for you, I should have died last night." "Your recovery is due to Hofer, not to myself," I declared. I longed to speak of her visit to Witten and her relations with the Major, but dared not. By doing so, I should only expose myself as an eavesdropper and a spy. Therefore I was held to silence. My thoughts wandered back to that fateful night when I was called to the house with the grey front at Queensgate Gardens. That house, she had told me, was the home of a friend. I remembered how, after our marriage, I had seen her lying there as one dead, and knew that she had fallen the victim of some foul and deep conspiracy. Who was this man who called himself Windham Wind? An associate of the Major's, who was careful in the concealment of his identity? The manner in which the plot had been arranged was both amazing in its ingenuity and bewildering in its complications. And, lounging before me there in the low silken chair, her small mouth slightly parted, displaying an even set of pearly teeth, sat the victim, the woman who was unconsciously my wedded wife. Her attitude towards me was plainly one of fear lest I should discover her secret. It was evident that she now regretted having told me of that strange, dreamlike scene, which was photographed so indelibly upon her memory, that incident so vivid that she vaguely believed she had been actually wedded. "So, you are returning to Atworth again?" I asked, for want of something better to say. "I believe that is Nora's intention," she responded quickly, with a slight sigh of relief at the change in our conversation. "Have you many visitors there?" "Oh, about 15, all rather jolly people. It's such a charming place, Nora must ask you down there." "I should be delighted," I said. Now that I had money in my pocket and was no longer compelled to toil for the bare necessities of life, I was eager to get away from the heat and the dust of the London August. This suggestion of hers was to me doubly welcome too, for as a visitor at Atworth I should be always beside her. That she was in peril was evident, and my place was near her. On the other hand, however, I distrusted her ladyship. She had, at the first moment of our meeting, shown herself to be artificial and an admirable actress. Indeed, had she not, for purposes known best to herself, endeavoured to start a flirtation with me? Her character everywhere was that of a smart woman, popular in society and noted for the success of her various entertainments during the season, but women of her stamp never commended themselves to me. Doctors, truth to tell, see rather too much of the reverse of the medal, especially in social London. "When did you return from Wiltshire?" I inquired, determined to clear up one point. "The day before yesterday," she responded. "In the evening?" "No, in the morning." Then her ladyship had lied to me, for she had said they had arrived in London on the morning of the day when the unknown woman in black had called. Beryl had told the truth, and her words were proved by the statement of Bob Raymond that he had seen her pass along Rowan Road. Were they acquaintances? As I reflected upon that problem, one fact alone stood out above all others. If I had been unknown to Wind and that scoundrel Tattersett, how was it that they were enabled to give every detail regarding myself in their application for the marriage license? How, indeed, did they know that I was acting as Bob's locum tenens, or how was the tempter so aware of my penury? No. Now that my friend had betrayed himself, I felt convinced that he knew something of the extraordinary plot in which I had become so hopelessly involved. "The day before yesterday," I said, looking her straight in the face, "you came to Hammersmith to try to find me." She started quickly, but in an instant recovered herself. "Yes," she admitted. "I walked along Rowan Road, expecting to find your plate on one of the doors, but could not." "I have no plate," I answered. "When I lived there I was assistant to my friend, Dr. Raymond." "Raymond!" she exclaimed. "Oh, yes, I remember I saw his name, but I was looking for yours." "You wish to see me?" "Yes, I was not well," she faltered. "But your cousin knew that I lived with Dr. Raymond. Did you not ask her?" "No," she answered. "It never occurred to me to do so." Rather a lame response, I thought. But last night she found me quite easily. She called upon Dr. Raymond, who gave her my new address. And continuing, I told her of my temporary abode. "I know," she replied. "Have you ever met my friend Raymond?" I inquired with an air of affected carelessness. "Not to my knowledge," she answered quite frankly. "How long ago did Hofer leave?" I asked. "About an hour, I think. He has locked the door of the morning room and taken the key with him," she added, laughing. She presented a pretty picture indeed in that half-darkened room, leaning back gracefully and smiling upon me. "He announced no fresh discovery?" "He spoke scarcely a dozen words." "But this mystery is a very disagreeable one for you who live here. I presume that you live with your cousin always?" "Yes," she responded. "After my father's death some years ago, I came here to live with her." "So her father was dead. The tempter was not, as I had all along suspected, her father." "Oh, I longed to take her in my arms and tell her the truth, that I was actually her husband and that I loved her. Yet how could I? The mystery was so complicated and so full of inscrutable points that to make any such declaration must only fill her with fear of myself." We chatted on while I feasted my eyes upon her wondrous beauty. Had she, I asked myself, ever seen young Chetwoode since her return to London? Did she really love him, or was he merely the harmless but necessary admirer which every girl attracts towards herself as a sort of natural instinct? The thought of him caused a vivid recollection of that night in Witton Park to arise within me. Where was Tattersett, the man who had laughed at her when she declared her intention of escaping him by suicide? Who was he? What was he? It occurred to me, now that I had learned some potent facts from her own lips, that my next course should be to find this man and investigate his past. By doing so I might elucidate the problem. Her ladyship, with a cry of welcome upon her lips, entered the room and sank, hot and fatigued, into a cosy armchair. "London is simply unbearable," she declared. "It's ever so many degrees hotter than at Adworth, and in the stores it's awfully stuffy. In the provision department butter, bacon, and things seem all melting away." "You'll be glad to get back again to Wiltshire," I laughed. "Very. We shall go by the night mail tomorrow," she answered. "Why don't you come up and visit us, Doctor? My husband would be charmed to meet you, I'm sure." "That's just what I've been saying, dear," exclaimed Beryl. "Do persuade Dr. Colkirk to come." "I'm sure you are both very kind," I replied, "but at present I am in practice." "You can surely take a holiday," urged Beryl. "Do come. We would try to make it pleasant for you." Her persuasion decided me, and after some further pressing on the part of her ladyship, I accepted the invitation with secret satisfaction, promising to leave in the course of a week or 10 days. Then we fell to discussing the curious phenomena of the previous night, until, having exhausted the subject, I rose to take my leave. "Good-bye, Dr. Colkirk," Beryl said, looking into my eyes as I held her hand. "I hope we shall meet soon down at Wiltshire, and when we do, let us forget all the mystery of yesterday." "I suppose you have given Hofer permission to visit the room when he wishes to pursue his investigations?" I said, turning to her ladyship. "Of course. The house is entirely at his disposal. One does not care to have a death-trap in one's own house." "He will do his best. Of that I feel quite sure," I said. And then again, promising to visit her soon, I shook her hand, bade them both adieu, and with a last look at the frail, graceful woman I loved, went out into the hot, dusty street. In order to celebrate my sudden ascension to wealth, I lunched well at Simpson's, and then took a hansom to old Hofer's dismal rooms in Bloomsbury. To me, so gloomy and severe is that once aristocratic district that, in my hospital days, I called it Gloomsbury. Hofer occupied a dingy flat in Museum Mansions. I was almost knocked back by the choking fumes of some acid of which he was experimenting on. A dense blue smoke hung over everything, and through it loomed the German's great fleshy face and gold-rimmed spectacles. He was in his shirt-sleeves, seated at a table, watching some liquid boiling in a big glass retort. Around his mouth and nose a damp towel was tied, and as I entered he motioned me back. "Ah, don't come in here, my dear Colkirk. I will come to you. The air is not good just now. Wait for me there in the room." Heedless of his warning, however, I went forward to the table, coughing and choking the while. I took out my handkerchief when suddenly he snatched it from me and steeped it in some pale yellow solution. Then, when I placed it before my mouth, inhaling it, I experienced no further difficulty in respiration. The nature of the experiment on which he was engaged I could not determine. From the retort he was condensing those suffocating fumes, drop by drop, and now and then dipping pieces of white prepared paper into the liquid thus obtained. I stood by, watching in silence. Once he placed a drop of that liquid upon a glass slide, dried it for crystallization, and placed it beneath the microscope, he examined it carefully. He grunted, and I knew he was not satisfied. Then he added a few drops of some colorless liquid to that retort, and the solution at once assumed a pale green hue. He boiled it again for 3 minutes by his common metal watch, then, having drained it off into a shallow glass bowl to cool, blew out his lamp. Then I followed him back into his small, cozy, but rather stuffy little den. "Well," he inquired, "we have called at her ladyship's, eh?" "Yes," I replied, stretching myself in one of his rickety chairs. "But you were there before me. What have you discovered?" "Nothing." "But that experiment I have just witnessed, has it no connection with the mystery?" "Yes, some slight connection. It was, however, a failure." He grunted, still speaking with his strong accent. "You have experienced the same sensation there today, I hear?" I said. "Yes, but not so strong." "And the same injection cured you?" "Of course. That, however, tells us nothing. We cannot yet ascertain how it is caused." "Or find out who was that unknown woman in black," I added. "If we could discover her, we might obtain the key to the situation," he responded. "I've been invited by her ladyship to visit them in Wiltshire," I said suddenly as I lit a cigarette, "and I have accepted. Have I done right, do you think?" "You would have done far better to stay here in London," grunted the old man. "If we mean to get to the bottom of this mystery, we must work together." "How?" "In this affair, my dear Colkirk," he exclaimed with a sudden burst of confidence, "there is much more than of what we are aware. There is some motive in getting rid of Miss Wynne secretly and surely. I feel certain that she knows who her mysterious visitor was, but dare not tell us." "I am going down to Atworth," I said. "Perhaps I shall discover something." "Perhaps," he sniffed dubiously. "But depend upon it, the key to this problem lies in London. You haven't yet told me who this Miss Wynne is." "A lady who, her father being dead, went to live with Sir Henry Pierpoint Lane and his wife." "Ah, and she has no home? I thought not." "Why, what made you think that?" "I fancied so," he said, continuing to puff at his great pipe. "I fancied, too, that she had a lover, a young lover, who was a lieutenant in a cavalry regiment." "How did you know?" "Merely from my observations. It was all plain last night." "How?" But he grinned at me through his great ugly spectacles without replying. I knew that he was a marvellously acute observer. "And your opinion of her ladyship?" I inquired, much interested. "She, like her charming cousin, is concealing the truth," he answered frankly. "Neither are to be trusted." "Not Miss Wynne?" "No, for she knows who her visitor was and will not tell us." Then he paused. In that moment I made a sudden resolve. I asked him whether he had read in the newspapers the account of the Witten tragedy. "I read every word of it," he responded. "A most interesting affair. I was not well at the time, otherwise I dare say I might have gone down there." "Yes," I said. "From our point of view it is intensely interesting, the more so because of the fact, namely, that her ladyship was among the visitors when the colonel was so mysteriously assassinated." "At Witten!" he exclaimed, bending forward. "Was she at Witten?" "Yes," I answered. "And her cousin, Miss Wynne?" "Of that I am not quite sure. All I know is that she was there on the afternoon previous to the tragedy. Sir Henry's wife is Mrs. Chetwode's bosom friend." The old fellow grunted, closed his eyes, and puffed contentedly at his pipe. "In that case," he observed at last, "her ladyship may know something about that affair. Is that your suspicion?" "Well, yes, to tell the truth, that is my opinion." "And also mine," he exclaimed. "I am glad you have told me this, for it throws considerable light upon my discovery." "Discovery?" I echoed. "What have you discovered?" "The identity of the woman in black who visited Miss Wind last night." "You have discovered her already?" I cried. "Who was she?" "A woman known as La Gioia," responded the queer old fellow, puffing a cloud of rank smoke from his heavy lips. "La Gioia!" I gasped, open mouthed and rigid. "La Gioia! And you have found her?" "Yes, I have found her." Chapter 23. A Counterplot. "I have no knowledge yet of who the woman is," responded Hofer in response to my question. "I only know that her name is La Gioia. But you are aware of her identity, it seems." "No, like yourself, I only know her name." He glanced at me rather curiously through his big spectacles, and I knew that he doubted my words. I pressed him to explain by what means he had made the discovery, but his answers were ambiguous. In brief, he believed that I knew more than I really did, and therefore declined to tell me anything. He was extremely eccentric, this queer old dabbler in the occult, and I knew well that, having once adopted a plan in the pursuit of an inquiry, no power on earth would induce him to deviate from it. Fully an hour I remained in that atmosphere full of poisonous fumes, watching a further but futile analysis that he made, and afterwards took my leave of him. I went back to Bayswater, wrote a letter of resignation to the doctor who had employed me, and then went forth again upon my round of visits. The practice was large and scattered, and several cases were critical ones. Therefore it was not until nearly 8 o'clock that I returned again, fagged and hungry, only to find the waiting-room filled with club patients and others. The irregularity of meals is one of the chief discomforts of a busy doctor's life. I snatched a few moments to swallow down my soup, and then entered the surgery, and sat there until past 9 ere I could commence dinner. Then, over my coffee and a pipe, I sat at ease, thinking over the many occurrences of the day. Truly it had been an eventful one, the turning point of my life. I telegraphed my mother, telling her of my good fortune, and, in response, received her hearty congratulations. One of the chief gratifications which the £1,000 had brought to me was the fact that, for a year or so, she would not feel the absolute pinch of poverty as she had done through so long past. And I was invited to Atworth. I should there have an opportunity of always being at the side of the woman I loved so madly, and perhaps be enabled to penetrate the veil of mystery in which she was surrounded. I was suspicious of the baronet's wife, suspicious because she had made her first call upon me under such curious circumstances. How did she know me, and for what reason had she sought my acquaintance? And she had endeavoured to flirt with me. Oh, her beauty, her smartness, and her clever women's wiles might have turned the heads of the majority of men, but I loved Beryl, and she was mine. Mine. Reader, I have taken you entirely into my confidence, and I am laying bare to you my secret. Need I tell you how maddening the enigma had now become, how near I always seemed to come to some solution, and yet how far off the truth? Place yourself in my position for a single moment, adoring the woman who, although she was actually my wife, was yet ignorant of the fact, and I dare not tell her the truth, lest she might hold me in suspicion as one who had conspired against her. So far from the problem being solved, each day rendered it more intricate and more inscrutable, until the continual weight upon my mind drove me to despair. Hence my anxiety for the days to pass in order I might journey down to Atworth. At last, on a close, overcast afternoon in the middle of September, when the hot sun seemed unable to penetrate the heavy veil of London smoke and the air was suffocating, I left Paddington, and in due course found myself upon the platform of the wayside station of Corsham, close to the entrance to the box tunnel, where Sir Henry and his wife awaited me. The former was a tall, smart-looking elderly man with grey hair and a well-trimmed grey beard, who, on our introduction, greeted me most cordially, expressing a hope that I should have a good time with him. I liked him at once. His face was open and honest, and his hand-grip was sincere. We mounted the smart dog-cart, and, leaving my baggage to the servant, drove out into the high road which ran over the hills, looming purple in the gold sunset haze, to the Tow-Bridge. 5 miles through that picturesque, romantic district, one of the fairest in England, Skirting the Monk's Park, crossing the old Roman road between Bath and London, and having ascended the ridge of the steep known as Corsham Side, we descended again through the little old-fashioned village of Atworth by a road which brought us, at last, to the lodge of the Hall. Then, entering the drive, we drove up to the fine old Tudor mansion, low and comfortable-looking, with its long facade almost overgrown with ivy. One of those stately homes of England, it stood commanding the view of the whole range of Wiltshire hills, the trees and park now bathed in the violets of the afterglow. From the great hall the guests came forth to meet us in old English welcome, and as I descended, Beryl herself, fresh in a pink cotton blouse and a short cycling skirt, was the first to take my hand. "At last, Dr. Colkirk," she cried. "We're awfully delighted to see you." Our eyes met, and I saw in hers a look of genuine welcome. "You are most kind," I answered. "The pleasure is, I assure you, quite mutual." And then my host introduced me to all the others. The house, built in the form of a square, with a large courtyard in the centre, was much larger than it appeared from the exterior. The hall, filled as it was with curios and trophies of the chase, for the baronet was a keen sportsman and his wife also was an excellent shot, formed a comfortable lounge. My host and hostess had travelled widely in India and in the East, and most of the Atworth collection had been acquired during their visits to the colonies. The room assigned to me was a bright, pleasant one, clean with old-fashioned chintzes, while from the deep window I could see across the lawn and the deep glen beyond, away over the winding Avon to the darkening hills. At dinner I was placed next to my hostess, with Beryl on my left. The latter wore a striking gown of turquoise blue, which, cut low at the neck, suited her admirably. Her wonderful gold-brown hair had evidently been arranged by a practised maid, but as I turned to her before she seated herself, I saw at her throat an object which caused me to start in surprise. Suspended by a thin gold chain around her neck, a small ornament of diamonds, an exact replica of that curious little charm, shaped like a note of interrogation, which I had taken from her on that fateful day of our marriage, which I wore around my neck at that moment. As I looked, it sparkled and flashed with 1,000 brilliant fires. Could that strange little device convey any hidden meaning? It was curious that, having lost one, she should wear another exactly similar. We sat down together, chatting merrily. The baronet's wife was in black lace, her white throat and arms gleaming through the transparency, while her corsage was relieved by crimson carnations. Around the table, too, were several other striking dresses, for the majority of the guests were young, and the house party was a decidedly smart one. The meal, too, was served with the stateliness which characterized everything in the household of Pierrepoint Lane. I watched my love carefully, and saw by her slightly flushed cheeks that my arrival gave her the utmost satisfaction. It was in the drawing-room afterwards, when we were sitting together, that I inquired if she had entirely recovered. "Oh, entirely," she replied. "It was extraordinary, was it not? Do you know whether Dr. Hover has visited the house again?" "I don't know," I responded. "He's so very secret in all his doings. He will tell me nothing save one thing." "One thing? What is that?" "He has discovered the identity of your visitor in black." "He has?" she cried quickly. "Who was she?" "A woman whom he called by a curious foreign name," I said, watching Beryl's face all the while. "I think he said she was known amongst her intimates as, La Gioia." The light died in an instant from her face. "La Gioia?" she gasped. "And he knows her?" "I presume that, as a result of his inquiries, he made this discovery. His shrewdness is something marvelous. He has succeeded in many cases where the cleverest detectives have utterly failed." "But how can he have found her?" she went on, greatly agitated by my statement. "I've no idea. I only tell you this, as he just made the announcement to me, without any explanation." She was silent, her eyes downcast. The ornament at her throat caught the light and glittered. My words had utterly upset her. "I must tell Nora," she said briefly at last. "But I presume that you know this person called La Gioia?" I remarked. "Know her?" she gasped, looking at me quickly. "Know her? How should I know her? Because she visited you as a messenger from the friend whose name you refused to tell me. I did not know it was her, she declared wildly. I cannot think it was actually that woman. You have then a reason for wishing not to meet her? I have never met her, she declared in a hard voice. I do not believe she was actually that woman. I have merely told you Hofer's statement, I answered. I know nothing of who or what she is. The name sounds as though she were an actress. Did he tell you anything else? She demanded. Not another word beyond what you've already said? He only told me that he only discovered her identity. He has not found out her motive in visiting me? She cried quickly. Not yet, as far as I am aware. She breathed more freely. That she desired to preserve the secret of this woman whom she feared was plain, but for what reason it was impossible to guess. Indeed, by her attitude it seemed very much as though she were actually aware that her visitor and La Gioia were one and the same person. I saw by the twitching of her lips that she was nervous. I knew that she now regretted allowing Hofer to prosecute his inquiries into the curious phenomena. As I sat there, feasting my eyes upon her peerless beauty, I thought it all over, and arrived at the conclusion that, to discover the truth, I must remain patient and watchful, and never for a single instant show my hand. I was suspicious of the baronet's wife, and regarded her rather as an enemy than as a friend. She had forced herself upon me with some ulterior motive which, although not yet apparent, would, I felt confident, some day be revealed. Fortunately, at that moment, a smart woman in a cream gown went to the piano and began to play the overture from Adam's Popée de Nuremberg, rendering silence imperative. And afterwards, at my suggestion, my wife and I strolled along to the billiard-room. She handled her cue quite cleverly for a woman, and was frequently applauded for her strokes. Of the agitation caused by my words, not a single trace now remained. She was as gay, merry, and reckless as the others. Indeed, she struck me as the very soul of the whole party. There was a smartness about her, without that annoying air of mannishness, which has, alas, developed among girls nowadays, and all that she did was full of that graceful sweetness so typically English. The billiard-room echoed with laughter, again and again, for the game proved an exciting one, and the men of the party were, of course, gallant to the ladies in their play. There was a careless freedom in it all that was most enjoyable. The baronet was altogether an excellent fellow, eager to amuse everybody. What, I wondered, would he say if he knew of the vagaries of his smart wife, namely, that instead of visiting her relatives, she had run up to London for some purpose unknown? One fact was plain to me before I had been an hour in the house. He allowed her absolute and complete liberty. We chatted together, sipping our whiskies between our turns at the game, and I found him a true type of the courteous, easy-going English gentleman. I cannot, even today, tell what had prejudiced me against his wife, but somehow I did not like her. My distrust was vague, undefined, and I could not account for it. She was eager to entertain me, it was true, anxious for my comfort, merry, full of smart sayings, and altogether a clever and tactful hostess. Nevertheless, I could not get away from the distinct feeling that I had been invited here with some ulterior motive. The thought was a curious one, and it troubled me, not only that evening, but far into the silent night, as I lay awake striving to form some theory, but ever in vain. Of one thing alone I felt absolutely assured. I am quick to distinguish the smallest signs, and I had not failed to become impressed by the truth I had read in her eyes that night, that she was not sincere. She was plotting against me. I knew it, and regretted that I had accepted her invitation.